No mai haere mai ki Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Welcome to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod, brought to you by Ashley and Mountain Medical Hair Centres. With the Super Rugby Player of the Season prize wrapped up with 2 weeks until the end of the regular season, we talk about what is different about Ardie this year. What skills have we seen that we haven't seen before? But will his form be enough to get Moana Pacifica through to the playoffs, or will it be the Blues? We look at their chances considering their run home. Same goes for the Brumbies, Crusaders and Chiefs in the race for top spot with 2 weeks left. After a small drought, Sevu Reece goes to 65 tries. We break down the stats and ask, who were the most effective wingers in Super Rugby history? And the numbers might surprise you. Plus, the Highlanders, they're dead last, but they don't look like the worst team in the comp. We'll talk about that and whether the draw is ripping off some teams. And the Black Ferns, once again, couldn't beat Canada at home with not long left into the World Cup. Should New Zealanders be worried? And of course, our weekly Rugby Ready giveaway, where you can win training packages designed by the All Blacks guru Gill and his team. Stick around for this week's keyword. We'll also have your comments and your emails. We'll get into the tipping comp and so much more, any rabbit holes that we end up going down. So James Parsons joining me now. Off the back of seeing the Blues and Moana Pacifica at your home stadium, what an experience. What was that like?
Yeah, well, hard to say if it's the home stadium. There's probably 80% Moana fans. There's plenty of flags, and any time they made a break, man, it was an eruption. It was a great evening. Plenty of kids there. It was a great sight for rugby. Obviously, being a Blues fan, it was not the result we're after, but you've just got to credit the way this Moana Pacifica side has just risen to the challenge week after week, and talk about teams with purpose and going after something bigger than themselves. They are definitely living that.
Yeah, well, we'll see which one of those two teams, because it's still pretty 50-50 to find out who goes through to that. Speaking of playoff football, Bryn Hall over in Japan has just knocked off a quarterfinal. He's into a semi-final. He has another title in his sights, maybe another tattoo on the bicep there, Bryn, in a few weeks' time. Tell us about that. You guys had a really good outing on the weekend.
Yeah, it was, I think, just a good introduction to finals footy. I think it was a good reminder, I guess, for our group that the season is the season. And I guess when you come to finals footy, it's a little bit different. So teams are desperate, and I guess that intensity goes up. So yeah, we started really well, but couldn't score points. Suntory, to their credit, were very good around that defensively, holding us out. And I guess in the second half, just kind of found a way to win ugly and had a few more moments in them. So setting us up against Panasonic, who we've had pretty close games this year. I think we had one draw not too long ago. We also had a loss to them in the last couple of minutes. So yeah, it's going to be a great game. We're really looking forward to the week here for us.
Yeah, so we've got Kubota versus Panasonic in your game, and then Toshiba versus Kobe. So if you guys win this weekend, what are you expecting? Toshiba, most likely? Richie just going to take them through?
Hopefully for us, we'd love to not play Toshiba. They're very good, and I guess with Richie and how they do play. But yeah, I think these four teams that are here at the moment, it's going to be tough to be able to get through. So hopefully we get the job done against Panasonic, and then whatever plays out there against a good Kobe team, or Richie and how he's been playing this year with that group as well.
Good luck for that. Let's have a talk about some Super Rugby. Let's get straight into the Ashley and Martin Medical Hair Centres turning point. Of course, Ardie Savia, involved in the turning point, involved in 1,000 turning points. Every time he touches the ball or gets involved, it completely changes the game on his head. He's absolutely phenomenal at the moment, Jipper. My question to you is, which one of those turning points should we focus on?
Well, I think for me, and I think it was the difference, is his decision-making. Like speaking with Tana after the game, they didn't go in with a plan around what they'd do at penalties, but the two penalties he took from right in front, 10 metres from the line, that's 6 points at 27-21, that's a 6-point difference. And it took their conversion rate, if you look at theirs is at 60% to the Blues at 30%. Had they taken points, could have they been in a better position? And I just thought it was a mature, process, decision-making of what he wanted as scoreboard pressure. That scoreboard pressure then led to them scoring off the back of errors as the Blues were chasing the game. And for me, those two decisions, and even the early 3 points was a deciding factor in this game, and just showed how, I don't know, even if you look at Ardie and that backfield coverage as well, he gets back and he takes that crossfield kick because he's seen Willie Havili is injured and he knows it needs to be covered. He's just so in flow, that flow state. He just seems to be able to make clear decisions that lead to the right outcomes. And I know that sounds easy to say, but when you're in it was a hell of an atmosphere, big emotional game. Blues versus Moana Pacifica, he was just on. And even when he didn't get that try that he wanted, just it gathered the group, they scored again like 5-10 minutes later. They had a full role reversal in terms of the way that, he as the captain and the leaders in that side just dominated with clarity all night.
And you're comparing it to the Highlanders game where they lost their rag a little bit.
Even just when they played the Blues at Eden Park, they were frustrated with the ref and you could see that in their body language. Their body language all night. Like, if we use that no try, like that would be incredibly frustrating. And yes, he was trying to have his piece, but as soon as it was, okay, it's going to the line out, you could see he was like, get back in here, boom, into the line. And because of that body language and that mindset, it's like it spread across their team. And as I say, they scored 5 or 10 minutes later anyway, and it didn't cost them the game, but it didn't distract or let them lose the game as well. But yeah, for me, it was the 2 penalty decisions to take the 3 for that scoreboard pressure, playing that finals footy mindset that sort of shone brightly for me.
As a former captain, I suppose you learn captaincy to some degree, don't you? Over time, you refine your skill set as a captain the same way that you do as a player. Are you seeing that from Ardie? Is his captaincy abilities actually growing as time goes by?
Yeah, he's always had a good feel for the game, but it was just, and why I mentioned speaking with Tana is, what plans were in place, and he was like, no, it's all about the feel. So I think, between the coaching staff and Ardie, they're not going in with prescribed plans, but they're smart enough just to take a breath, assess, look at the clock, look at the scoreboard, maybe buy a little bit of time if there's a message that you can get from the sideline to make clear that you've got all the facts before making that decision. I think that calmness and that composure that, he showed in particular throughout the whole 80, definitely defined, and everyone else in that Moana Pacifica side fed off. And if anything, it spooked the Blues as well, like they weren't able to play their game because of this, this clarity, but the ferociousness as well was there, that sort of fire in the belly, cool upstairs.
It's hard to think that there's been a better Super Rugby season by an individual player ever. I mean, we knew Ardie could do breakdown turnovers, we knew he could carry the ball really strongly, we knew he had all of those skill sets that he's done for the All Blacks for some time, Brenner. But what elements of his game have you seen this year that you haven't seen before? Where are the places where you've seen Ardie really step up to go from great to just out of this world?
It's been able to have an understanding where he needs to pop up in tight moments of the game. Because if you look at any time in the season when they've needed a play or needed something to happen, and I guess there's a lull in the momentum with the Moana Pacifica, he comes in and is able to do it. Now, whether it's a turnover, whether it's a steal, whether it's a spiral kick that you can kick 60 metres, whether it's a chip and chase, whether it's an understanding, a defensive read to be able to be in the back line, to be able to take that ball with William Harvili out, all those kind of situationally moments, I think that's where he's been really good from Moana, and he's needed to be, because I think in the past with Moana Pacifica, they've been in games where they've been able to have it really close, but they just haven't had that person that's been able to bring them from the depths, or I guess the bottom, to take them up to that promised land, and he's been able to do that. And there was no more performance that you saw on the weekend, and I got a little bit of hate of what I thought that performance looked like, Dan Carter-esque, I guess, at Super Rugby. That Jipper and I did have a wee little laugh before we came on air, but that's what I think, Ross. It's the situationally, the moments that he's having when it's required from Moana Pacific to get wins. He's at the forefront of it, and he's deserved it to win the MVP race with 2 games in hand.
So you're saying the Super Rugby version of Dan Carter versus the Lions?
We laughed about it, and I think I was kind of just maybe peppering Jip with obviously the outcome of the result as well at that time, saying that. But look, we do know that Dan Carter, we've touched on it, that that's probably the best performance we've seen from a rugby player, and especially on the international stage. But look, at Super Rugby level, it's hard to argue, a performance that I can think off the top of my head where someone single-handedly won a performance. And sorry, that's not to take away from the Moana Pacifica guys that were playing very well for that game, but 21 carries, the amount of effort and work rate you have to do to be able to put yourself into that position, the chip and chase, the spiral kick for 50 metres, on the edge smart play that Jip's touched on to be able to cover the backfield, and then obviously break down turnovers to be able to win a game, especially that last one. Did I miss anything else? Is there anything else that you can't do as a rugby player?
No, I mean, there isn't. But I think as well, like for me, Ardie's always been a central figure of any team he's been in, so oppositions target him. But because a lot of his great stuff is on hard ball gets, like loose ball on the ground, he gets it and he'll make a line break, overthrows at the line out. And because you can't plan for that, that's when he's getting most of his pay. Like a lot of his 19 carries are from turnovers won or loose balls or, loose carries from the opposition. So I just think as I say, it's like that flow state in terms of when he actually carries, there's no way a defence is ever going, oh, we don't know where he is. They know where he is, but when he injects, he's so clear on the defensive pitches that he can just, because all those metres at Bryn, 85 metres of his 117 or whatever were post-contact. Like going out the backs, and then, he creates, out of all his carries, 84% gain line and then 64% lightning quick ball for others to shine. Like, I just think he's got such a clear balance in his decision-making process, both on attack and D, when he can best utilise his skill set and when he can best utilise it as a distraction for others to utilise their skill set.
But just one thing I did want to touch on, and I think the growth that I have seen in Moana this year is that, we have talked about discipline issues, and they had nine penalties. But what I did like is when they did have their yellow cards, they were able to, I guess, not have a slow ball effect from that, because I think discipline issues in the past have been able to, I guess, give teams an opportunity to be able to score points through that. But look, they were able to score points during those yellow cards. Tomo Fonel's try, also even Tui Polita, when he got sent off, they were able to score 8 points during that passage of play as well. So the growth in that area was really good to be able to stay in the fight. Then I also just think their kick balance. They had 32 kicks on the week, and I think they kicked a lot better than the Blues. And I think the Blues' contestable game was a little bit off, and I guess their kicking decisions. Jib, you were talking before off air that Jonathan Talmatini was in the lineup, and there was actually a bit of kick space in behind, and they weren't able to execute, and I guess make it a little bit more difficult for Moana Pacifica, who are operating at 92% defensively. So I just think their kick balance as well. We talked about a pre-game last week around if they can get that balance right, it will lead them to getting a good result. So they're in a very good state at the moment. And I think one thing for Tana that he could be happy about as well is that I think they can get better. There were a couple of times in that second half where I think they had momentum. They were able to go through their forward pack, but a little knock on really close to the line. I think there were two times by the forward pack in that 45th to 52nd minute where they could have scored points to put more pressure on the Blues. But that's an improving fact that I think Tana will be really excited around, is that if they do get that right, they probably don't have to have a close finish. So we'll probably go in a little bit more depth around what the table is going to look like, what it's going to look like for them. But look, if I'm the Chiefs, you're going to have to be at your best, because I think Moana, they're in a rich reign of form at the moment. And hopefully they do have a tough run. Hopefully they can continue this consistency, because it's been great to see.
Just on the turnovers, though, and the penalties, Bryn, again, I think I really want to make it clear, like, just being at the ground, the Blues still tackled at 91%. But where the Moana Pacifica was so on, even with the attacking game, and this is where a lot of the penalties came from, they got 70% gain line. Like, that is a lot of carries over the gain line, which forces you into poor decisions around the breakdown, or doesn't allow you to get back on side, and that's where a penalty an advantage. And then from that, they got 55% lightning quick ball. And you've got to also understand that probably could have been higher, but sometimes they slowed their own ball down for a box kick or whatever. So that's every time they got gain line, their lightning quick ball would be around 80-85%. And that allowed them to get the 7 clean breaks to the Blues too. So again, I think this game for me was more about what Moana did than what the Blues did or didn't do, if you know what I mean. Like, they just dictated terms both sides of the ball.
Let's talk about what the referees did or didn't do, because there was a lot of conversation after this game about the Senerevi try, where Lalomilo put his foot into touch, then threw in an offload inside. The Blues turned it over, Moana Pacifica turned it back over, and then they went and scored. The refs went upstairs, and that's where the rules all started coming into question. This is pure rugby, this is the kind of problem that rugby has. When getting it right is getting it wrong.
We have a problem.
We have a problem. Getting it right is getting it wrong. Right is right. Get the right call. So he did put his foot out, and it was ruled as no try. But the World Rugby rules have changed since that Aaron Smith try against the Springboks, when there was a knock-on and they went back multiple phases when they shouldn't have. So there's been a change, I suppose, both in the description of how far you can go back and in the rule itself. So there's now this term called the attacking passage of play. So the attacking passage of play is essentially from the time a team first gets possession until the time that the try is scored within that phase of play. Not phase, don't use the word phase, because
that confuses.
Passage of play. So within an attacking passage of play, that means from the time they turn the ball back over from the Blues, which means they can't go as far back as the foot in touch. So the wrong call was made, and that's been admitted. So that's bloody confusing for absolutely everyone. What are we supposed to do here to get absolute clarity when the refs are on the field having a conversation about what they're supposed to do? How are the rest of us supposed to understand what on earth is going on here?
Yeah, and you almost felt the refs knew. Well, no, I shouldn't put words in their mouths because I don't know what they're thinking, but it felt like Angus Gardner was like, okay, I know the rules say it should be a try, but I can clearly see he's out.
Yeah.
So you could see they were just fighting that battle because you have to think they all knew what the ruling was. But as soon as it went to, I think it was Josh Berry, and it got turned over, it sort of had to be a try as per the rules. But I agree with you. Like logically in my brain, I wouldn't be able to comprehend it if we can see that it's out and then they don't go back. Because if you put it the other way, throw it back inside and the Blues intercept and score, they'll go back and go, oh, it's out and it's a line out. I'll live with both because I think it's the right call. And the closer we can get to a right call, I think the better.
Brendan, what do you think about this? Because the essence of this is that Super Rugby has decided not to have the TMO talking to the referees on the field during play, which is something that does happen in test matches according to World Rugby rules, where they can get in the air and say, actually, the guy was out midway through the play and they can come back. They've gone for that because they want to speed up play, have less interference and put more onus on the people on the field to make the decisions in a more traditional way.
It was funny because I was on the bus actually sitting with Bernard and we were talking about the attacking, was it the attacking phase? No, the attacking play.
The attacking passage of play.
Attacking passage of play. So we're like, that's the first time I've heard that wording and we were trying to figure out, what it talked about, what it was. And so when we actually talked about and went in depth, we're like, obviously it came to the decision around it actually should have been a try because once Berry actually got that ball, that attacking phase play was done and then it reset it, so it should have been a try. But I think I like how we do it. Look, and this is just me personally, whenever I watch the Northern Hemisphere and there's a lot of controversy around being able to hear the TMO in the ear of the ref and the viewers can be able to hear it, and it's like 4, 5, 6 that are in a game. For me, I just get really frustrated with that. So for me personally, I like how we have it in Super Rugby and how it's really done really quick, and we still can get it right because we can go to the TMO after. And I do like the fact that Ben O'Keefe as well held it down. Whether he thought that or not, he generally thought it was actually not out. But I kind of like the system that we have. We're still able to have that TMO if we feel like we haven't got it right. And obviously Angus Gardner has seen that on the replay when they scored that try. And obviously the result wasn't right technically, but the process I think is a lot better from what I see in the Northern Hemisphere in some examples in like the Six Nations where it just takes really, really long, and I'm sick of hearing the TMO the whole time during the game. But
I think we've either, just to make it easier on refs, you've almost got to leave it to that referee group. Do you know what I mean? Rather than like that's a lot there.
Yeah.
Because technically it should have been awarded a try. They could have explained, over the mic to the crowd and to the TV how it is a try. So we've either got to keep this and deal with they'll get it wrong.
Yeah.
And we can't go back and live with it, or we've got to give them the license and the freedom to be able to go back when they see a clear and obvious.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because they're set up to fail here.
They are. And I'll explain again why in a second after Bryn talks.
I don't think they were aligned. I don't think there was two different examples that both the touches were giving. Sorry, the assistant referees were giving. So I can't remember what the first guy's name was that was talking, but he actually, from memory, he got the rule right.
Said it was a try.
Yeah, said it was a try. So he actually got that right. And then Ben O'Keefe came over the top and said, actually, no, it's actually not a try. So that's what I found interesting because when we were watching, I was like, oh, actually, no, I think he's right. But yeah, the alignment was actually different when they were explaining there with Ardie and Paddy when they were listening to Angus Gardner as well. So they actually weren't aligned when they were coming with that final call.
And there was a bit where the question was asked, are we inside protocol or outside of protocol? And this is what I really like about it, because it wasn't inside protocol. And that was almost like they said, okay, we're not inside protocol. But they went with common sense. The foot was on the line. The foot was out. So they threw out the rules and did the right thing. The foot was out. So in some ways, like, they got it right because it would have been silly if they had got it wrong. But just to make it even more confusing for everyone, This whole thing about attacking passage of play only works on some indiscretions. So there are other indiscretions that only go back 2 phases of play. So that's 2 phases within the attacking passage of play. So in some cases, it's the entire passage. In other cases, it's just 2 phases of the passage. So the 2 phases are offside, maul obstruction, and tackle complete. And the attacking passage of play where you can rule is knock on, throwing the ball forward, or touch and line out. So how are we supposed to remember this?
Well, I think probably you're relying on the TMO to go have an overriding, okay, you've heard from Graham and Ben, this is the ruling, we've got to award the try.
Yeah.
That's probably what you needed. But I agree with you, common sense. Like, as soon as it came up on the big screen, like, and it wasn't awarded, like, the crowd were fine with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they were like, oh, yeah, it was out, because they didn't understand the ruling. But, yeah, it's all the after the fact. And had Moana Pacifica lost, I think we wouldn't probably be sitting joking around it here now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But that's why I was trying to credit the maturity of the Moana Pacifica leaders, the way they galvanised that group to go and score a try 5 minutes later. Just shows that, their growth and development is massive, but it's very confusing. And like, we're code heads.
Yeah.
For the average person, you're probably just going to go, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm lost.
It's just, if we haven't lost you during this conversation already, what is right, and what happened is right, in my opinion, even though it was wrong. So let's carry on in the confusing state of rugby to chat about viewer email. So Jared Simmons sent through this email for us to have a chat about. Yeah, we're all confused. As good as Super Rugby has been this year with the speeding up of the game, is it going to cost us when it comes to test match rugby? The speeding up seems to come at a cost of ignoring other laws of the game, especially offsides anywhere on the field except in the last 5 metres from the try line. He attached a photo of a Whakatava box kick from the weekend with a number of Highlanders in front and says speeding up of the game shouldn't come at the cost of ignoring some laws of the game. We have seen a lot of runners in front of the kickers this year, Jim.
Yeah, even Riley's try against the Crusaders, the crossfield kick, that cost them a bonus point in the end. Like, from my angle, I was like, man, is he onside? I do agree, like, there has been slow creep, but with anything that speeds up, like, it speeds up for the refs as well. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we've got to, even at the start of the season, I said, we've got to come to the happiness that there's going to be stuff that's missed. We either want this brand of footy that's exciting, entertaining, high scoring, challenges defences more, or we go back to the very prescribed, slowing it down, defence-dominated game. Is it going to impact us? I don't know. I like to think if you're the best athlete in our country to represent the All Blacks, you can adjust.
Interestingly, though, when it comes to Jared's point about players being in front of the kicker, when you take away the escorts like we have this year, and you allow chasers to be in front of the kicker, that's an interesting cocktail. I mean, I think we saw on the weekend, Sevu Reece just laid a couple of people out chasing kicks.
And there's a number across all the games where the collision, you can't penalise it because there's no escorts, there's no protection, and if you're genuine contest for the ball, and I still look back, when this removing of escorts came in, I look back to that All Blacks South Africa test when Bode and Barrett got taken out, and that was hectic in terms of how much he spun and landed awkwardly. And I think the escorts is part of the job and part of the ability to manipulate. I'm not too sold on that. I just think we're in dangerous territory.
And Brennan, when you put up a box kick, you must be pretty happy about the way it looks when you know that there's no one there to protect the opposition guy, but also there's not a lot of looking at the people who are chasing. And even the TMO is not necessarily going back and having a look, not in Super Rugby anyway, Brent.
It's a lot easier to be able to execute your kick as well. Like sometimes if you're a little bit off in your box kick, the escorts are going to stop that run with the winger usually, and it's hard to be able to get for that contestable. But now, even if you're just a little bit off, even sometimes I've seen with some halfbacks that have kicked this year, you think it's a little bit too long, but because there's no S score and you can, if it's a fast winger, they can make up for that bad kick. So, as a halfback, it's been really good to be able to see your wingers get up for the ball, being able to make it a contestable. Because I think with an S score game, if you didn't get your box kick right, you pretty much were giving back the ball to the team pretty easily. So. Yeah, I think it's been good.
Let's carry on with Sevu Reece, because after a little drought, I suppose, in terms of his kind of drought, with a guy who is prolific at trying scoring as he is in Super Rugby, he's currently equal now with TJ Perenara and not far away. What makes it amazing about him being equal to TJ Perenara and his strike rate in Super Rugby is that he scored in 65 tries from 83 games. So he scores in 78% of the games that he plays, which is absolutely outstanding. Perenara scored at 40%. And if you go through the top guys of the try scorers, Julian Savia, 37%, Falau, 62%.
That's the one that gets me, Falau.
Yeah.
Like when I think Israel Falau, I felt like he was scoring every game.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was at 62% and Sevu's at 78%.
Yeah.
To be frank, I don't think we've appreciated it until you've actually presented those numbers, like how dominant and how strong he has been.
Yeah. So let's play the Super Rugby quiz. If you go from that list of the all-time try scorers to the all-time try scoring strike rate list, there are only 7 players in the history of Super Rugby with over 70% try scorers. Wow. There have been, and deal with me here, 2,972 players in Super Rugby history, and only seven of them have scored at over 70%. Brynna, Rupeni Thautau at 115%.
It was a hell of a season.
He only played 13 games of Super Rugby. That's out of this world.
But that's what I mean. Like for me, like Rupeni, when I think about it, we've talked about a lot around, Jonah Lomu and how many, when Rupeni was playing, he only played one season.
One season.
Yeah, but like
won a title and left.
We still talk about him around being, thinking that he was there for a couple of years, but it was just that 1 year that he was just electric and scored from every part of the field. So Rupeni Thautau, absolutely a magician. So it's just a shame, Chipper, that we didn't get to see more of him.
Yeah, it is, definitely for Blues fans. I think there's a few that will surprise you on this, especially the current players.
Yeah.
If you look at Waisaki Naholo, I know he's not current, but he's still running about in NPC. But, his strike rate, when you think about his first year at the Blues, didn't get as many tries as he liked and probably not as many opportunities, but what he did down at the Highlanders. And then your mate Will Jordan, tell you what, he's on the heels of Sevu Reece.
45 from 63.
Yeah. He'll be looking at that as well, actually. He does like the old strike rate percentage, or will when he's playing. But then I've seen a couple of old ones as well, like Joeli Vanderi as well, 70%, and Marika Vunumbaka, the 2 Fijian boys that were back in the day. So there's some great names in there. But sorry, Ross, and I should actually know this is a bit of a code here, but James Small, can you help me out?
Okay, Sharks.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah, I just want to,
That was the early days, and James Small is 3rd place on this list. So just read you the list. Rupeni Thautau, 15 tries in 13 games, 115%. Sevu Reece, 65 from 83, 78%. 3rd place, the only South African on the list, acknowledging that out of 7 players here, 5 of them are Fijian born. So we've got to acknowledge that. James Small is in 3rd place, 14 tries from 19 games in Super Rugby. Obviously, he straddled the amateur professional era, so he would have played a few more games in the amateur super competition, the Super 10, before it became Super 12. But 74% for James Small. I'm sure these day and ages, he would have had more red cards than that. He probably wouldn't have spent as much time.
I think all of us would have had a lot more red cards, just quietly.
After James Small, Waisaki Naholo, 73%, Will Jordan, 71%, Joeli Vanderi, 70%, and Marika Vunumbaka, 70%. So when you think about the fact that Sevu Reece and Will Jordan have been in the same team for the majority of that
It's a lot of tries.
That
shows the dominance of the Crusaders.
Exactly, like their ability to strike, like what do you call it, Brendan? Click attack. When you've got 2 guys like that on the top 7 list, currently playing in the same team and have won that many titles, you can see why.
I'd also love to see his try assists when he actually does kick the ball back in the inside. Like his ability to be able to kick the ball back and then so right foot, left foot. I think he's done one for me a couple of times. He did a couple at the start of the year off his left foot as well. So like his skill set to be able to do that as well. He's also a very good finisher around it and the work rate he has around the ball. But the try assist when he actually is on the edge to try and put it in the middle of the field off a pretty difficult side, left or right footed. I guess adds to his CV.
When they got up and they had the bonus point sitting there against the Tars, a bonus point at this time of the season, which is just so important, especially now that the Brumbies are out front and they've got a game against the Brumbies to finish off. Brenna, what does a conversation look like within the Crusaders when you know that you need maximum points and you know there's not much time left? How do you approach those last few minutes to try to hold on to that bonus point?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, you've got to acknowledge it, right? So, and no doubt that group probably would have known that they would have had a bonus point. The messages would have come down, or even the players would have known that there was a bonus point. So I think it's just within that, whatever's required, you've just got to be able to try and nail your own job. So whether it's a defensive play, being able to be in a defensive system, holding on to the ball, closing out a game, kicking long, kick chase, hard effort areas, all that kind of stuff is around, I guess trying to find a solution to get the job done. But, I think that's one thing that I guess they'll be disappointed about because, I did talk around, I actually did find out, Ross, they didn't stay in Coogee. So that led to the performance of why they ended up winning. They didn't stay there, so that's probably why they won. But no, I just think, but the start that they did have, obviously, the Waratahs came back in that middle passage of the second half to come back. But I think knowing that what's on the line and not getting their bonus point, there's obviously a few games to play out with that. But yeah, I think hopefully for their sake, it's not something they're going to look back and thinking that, geez, I wish we were able to get that bonus point. But to answer your question, Ross, they would have talked about it, but just unfortunately weren't able to execute in those moments. But I definitely think it would have been talked about from coaches, getting messages down. Leaders on the field would have been talking about that we've got a bonus point, right? Let's try and hold on and get this bonus point done and get out of Sydney with a bonus point.
It leaves them in an interesting position, doesn't it? With the Brumbies now on 43 points, but the Brumbies have a bye before playing the Crusaders at home. The Crusaders have the Landers at home and then the Brumbies away. If they'd got that bonus point, they could have in some ways afforded to lose to the Brumbies later on.
As long as they picked up another one against the Highlanders, it's quite a big
luxury at all. And then you've got the Chiefs who are at home against MP. Not an easy game, but one you'd expect them to win based on how they've performed this season. And then they've got the Highlanders away. So there are no absolute givens there. Given that, and you look at that table, Brumbies 43, Chiefs 41, Crusaders 41. Chiefs and Crusaders have a game in hand. What do you think happens?
I still feel like the Crusaders are potentially in the box seat in terms of their ability to get a bonus point. Like the Brumbies, although they're winning, it's not, they haven't been as clinical as they like. You'd like to think Crusaders at home, they'll get one there. That last round for the Chiefs is where I suppose it's going to really be tested. I still think it's up in the air. I can't really give you an answer. In terms of, I would have said the Chiefs normally because Canberra's a hard place to go, but I still think there's a hell of a lot to like around the way they fronted up against the Waratahs. On the road, the Crusaders fronted up. So I do think it's between those two. Obviously, I don't think the Brumbies with the bye can catch them, but I can't decide. I think this weekend will make it very clear where things are going to go.
I'm backing the Crusaders to beat the Brumbies in Canberra. Obviously, they'll get a bit of cattle back, and I just think at that time of the year, they've had some success in Canberra. So I just think it's between the Chiefs and the Crusaders for that top spot. And, I think their bonus points really going to hurt them because I think obviously Moana Pacifica, I think that's going to be a good game. I think getting a bonus point in general in these last two games it might be the winning.
Any Jamie Joseph coach side, like we saw on the weekend, they're not going to go away. They certainly won't want to finish at the bottom of the table. So I do think it's going to prove a little bit harder than people may think around getting bonus points and even wins against the Highlanders side.
I was on the phone to Sky Sport commentator Jeff McTainch, who's, a Highlanders man through and through earlier today. And I was taking the piss out of him. I was saying, are the Highlanders the best ever worst team in Super Rugby? and they're 11th on the table. They're coming dead last. But they have a points differential where they're averaging -6 per game. So they're in everything. So are they the best team to sit on the bottom of the table possibly ever?
Oh, yeah, but I also just think it's the strength of the comp. Like, they're only 2 outside, sitting 7th, 3 wins outside being in the 6. It's not a hell of a lot in terms of the competition when they've, finished within 7 points on most of those games. There's some they'll look back. Like, even when they got dusted up by the Crusaders, they actually had more 22 entries than any other, team has had against the Crusaders. They just couldn't get across the try line. So, they have had a strong season. But I must admit, when they fell to the bottom of the table after the Drua result on the weekend, like, I was surprised. I was like, it just hasn't felt like that's where they belong.
Bad, yeah.
But they've been on a bit of a wretched run and haven't been able to find that win. Like, again, against Moana Pacifica, close but no cigar. Against the Hurricanes, close but no cigar. It's almost that hurdle of them getting this result. They just can't withstand. A lot of them are lost in those last dying minute, like 82nd minute, was it, that Roygaard went over? They'll be frustrated by that they haven't been able to close games out. But to answer your question, I would say they're the best side to ever be sitting at last.
Yeah. It's a hell of a thing. Because I
spent a bit of time there too, so...
And dead last.
And dead last, so yeah.
Yeah, speaking of the Blues.
They're looking real good. Anyway, let's talk about your 6 titles. Let's be cut half full. What tattoo parlour are we going to for the 7th?
Lead us somewhere else. Lead us, navigate us back on track.
We're in a rabbit hole.
I quite enjoyed that though. It was painful for some, but for others, quite enjoyable.
I did need to state the obvious. I know how they feel.
But out of the Highlanders, there are obviously some really good points as well. Tavatawa Nawai was again outstanding at 12. And you're a big fan of Ratumaitavuki-Kneepkens.
I just think, since coming back from his neck injury, coming back from it, but the courage he's shown in the collision area, his speed, but the balance of his game in terms of his kicking, like whether it's contestable kick he chases on his own, whether it's territorial, the effort that he puts into a kick chase when someone else, like he is just flying down the field, backfield coverage. He's a genuine wing 15 for me, Bryn, and some of even the breakdown, he's getting a number of turnovers either through the jack or just barging straight through the collision area, and we know his pace, we know his attacking prowess, no question over that. But the balance of his game and the growth in his game defensively and via the boot, I don't know how you ignore it. For someone that's come off a short run-up after, a neck injury, a serious neck injury, you can't not sit up and watch. Like, I said to you on the phone last night when we were planning for the show, he's my new Roygaard. I'm getting captain of his fan club.
Well, you got Roygaard into the All Blacks single-handedly.
Well, I don't think I did. But I think he... in terms of his age, his maturity, his move to the Highlanders, I probably saw him as a winger, even when he played fullback at Taranaki, but the performance he's put in the 15 jersey at Super Rugby level, you just can't ignore it.
The 14 role, if Jordan's going to be a fullback and Bodie's just seen as a fullback, let's do this for argument's sake, then, who has that skill set of kind of what a Will Jordan was doing or a Ben Smith back in the day or Israel Dag with that kind of skill set of not being the power winger? And we touched on Sean Stevenson. We've touched on Shea Fihaki as well, who's had that ability and has been in that All Black environment a little bit in terms of his skill set, his triple threat game, his courage in around the contactor, which you'd have to think would be questioned coming off a serious neck injury, which he had. So, look, I've been really impressed. So I agree with Jip. I think if you're going to have a skill set of what you're wanting of that kind of difference in terms of what that number 14 role has been for us previously, he definitely fits that mold and definitely can be, in conversation, definitely for that kind of role of what we've seen in the number 14 in previous years.
Well, he's going well. Just stay back to the Highlanders for a second. Just bear with me here. They're coming last. Let's go back to
I've mentioned, sorry.
But when you look above them on the table and you've got the Drua and the Force, and then you think about the competition structure, and the competition structure has New Zealand teams playing each other twice and Australian conference teams playing each other twice. Acknowledging that...
3 games twice, so three teams twice.
Twice.
But New Zealand-based team for the Landers, Australian-based for
I mean, and I know the Aussies have been more competitive this year than in the past, and so you've got probably the Brumbies and the Reds games, which are far more difficult. If the Highlanders were on the other side of the draw, playing against 2 games against the draw and 2 games against the force, chances are they're not last. No. So it feels like if this was a pure round robin, the Highlanders wouldn't be dead last. Again, is rugby overcomplicating this? If we can find a simple solution where right is right and a team can be found to be the right place on the table because they've played everyone and we understand what's going on, Brenna, are we overcomplicating this? Have we got a team in last place because rugby's done them over?
In a fair world, it would be home and away. You're playing each team home and away, but, players probably aren't wanting to play more games like that. It's probably not feasible for that to be able to happen. So in an ideal world, you get a home and away series, but unfortunately with the Australian teams or New Zealand teams playing each other more because of obviously geographically, it just kind of is what it is, unfortunately.
In your question, you brought out the elephant that's in the room. Find a simple solution. It's not easy. Even we've had lengthy discussions about what said solution could be, and it's pretty challenging to find another way. The only thing I can think of is rather than the 3 games being specific to, it's not conference, but that's how they're decided as your area. Maybe just how the NPC does odds and evens and it's picked up that way from the table before. I don't know. I'm not savvy with coming up with draws, but I just think that the Aussies are playing well enough now for it to be a little bit more randomised.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if you play a pure round robin, and then you get to the end of that pure round robin and the top 6 teams then get to all play each other again. If we need to have 16 rounds, if we need that much to get the appropriate broadcasting money and to get the appropriate everything that keeps the game afloat, why not then go to a Super 6 where you've got 5 more games as a top 6 team, you sort out who really is the best, you only play again the teams that are in that place, and then you go to your quarterfinals for knockout. Brenna, what do you think?
What about the bottom of the table? Do they play a championship or gone?
I mean, they can play off for a cup if you want to keep the fans involved, or you can be cutthroat.
I'd tell you a few national selectors wouldn't mind seeing those guys have a bit of footy.
Yeah, well, maybe that's it. Maybe you do that. You
Premiership, championship sort of thing.
A bottom half of the table.
Because 10 games is enough. You just get culled out after 10 games. They'll play in other competitions. we don't want to put them in that position. I like that top 6 idea, play an extra 5, and then there's a championship for the bottom.
How would you feel, Joe, if you were in that bottom though?
If there's a trophy at the end. I don't have tattoos all over my body with trophies, me old boy.
Hey,
mate, you still enjoyed that championship trophy for Harbour. When we won that championship trophy for Harbour, you were all smiles.
See, it's that they do it in NPC already.
As fans, would they get behind it?
I don't know. It felt pretty good walking around the North Shore with the championship.
And you get an absolute ranking in a more fair way.
And then it might sort out
who is the bottom and who's
the bottom.
Yeah, so we really understand where everyone stood. Just saying. Give me a call. We'll talk it througll We'll change the comp.
Jack Measley.
How's that sound?
Get his number.
Just give me a call.
To my point, it's very complex.
I won't be putting my number out online.
No.
Too much abuse to be had. Right. Okay. Speaking of criticism, the Black Ferns. So they lost last year to Canada. There's my camera over there. They lost last year to Canada, and then this year they've drawn with Canada. We're heading into a World Cup. Looking at performance on the weekend, Jipper, where do you think they stand only a few games away from this World Cup now?
Yeah, look, looking at the game and looking at the stats, there's actually a lot to like about the stats, except for one area. And they allowed 71% lightning quick ball.
Yeah.
Canada allowed them just over 50, but that's the only stat. That was the only anomaly. They tackled at 91%. So it's not a question, or 89%, sorry. It's not, and 23% of that was dominant.
So it's effective tackling.
So that's effective, but it's the breakdown work. How do you slow the ball down? Because when you get 71% lightning quick ball, when you're not really even trying. Like, that is quick. That's hard. So you're always having to scramble. You're never like able to set in your defensive line and bring that line speed pressure, because it shows when they can, every time they got time to set, it was dominant collision. So somehow just creating that time at the breakdown and slowing that ball down. It doesn't have to be a breakdown steal. It just needs to be enough niggle, or even, you know, the ability to stack a player that has to fight to get their knees down, that buys everyone time, is probably the one area, because it was quite hard. Like, I had to watch the game twice, because when you see the score, you're like, oh, it can't have been that good, but it was, like, in a weird way, it was, except for this one defensive area that just put them on the back foot the whole time, and they just couldn't get ascendancy back. So they need to be able to break that ability of teams to get that lightning quick ball.
But out of respect to Canada, they are number 2 in the world, but there's a higher expectation of the Black Ferns in that they are World Cup champions and have been for some time, and to slide further down the rankings is probably not acceptable. So what do you think?
It's fair. I think, you know, there's just been so much history, I guess, with the Black Ferns and the expectation of us being able to win every single game. But look, we've got to give credit to Canada. Look, the lightning quick ball that the Canadians got, and I think the way that they were able to attack was actually a really breath of fresh air to actually watch some running rugby. And I think another area that probably the Canadians are really good, and even the Black Ferns were, was the turnover area. I think both teams had 10 turnovers each around the breakdown. So the breakdown area is a massive point, I think, for the Black Ferns, is that they're going to have to work on, because there's the Canadians that have been very good around that physicality area. The French as well last year were very good. And then also the English, who we know physicality-wise are very, very hard to stop. So that breakdown area work, and obviously Steve Jackson's there and Alan Bunting there, that coaching group will be talking around how they can fix that and be able to slow down that ball, because look, they attacked very well. Look, they had 43 defenders beat and had 12 line breaks. But 20 turnovers, which, you know, traditionally is usually a bit high, but I think it's a little bit common, I think, in the women's game that I've seen at the moment, that the high turnover rate is because we try to hold on to the ball a little bit longer. But that breakdown area is the biggest thing, because the attacking side, with the numbers that I've just said, they had more than enough opportunities with the attack that they are running. It's just probably on the other side of the ball that they've got to concentrate on, and their set piece as well. Now, they did operate at 66%, and they only did have like 4 or 5 lineouts, but I think against the big teams, the French and the English, that line-out defensive pressure that they are going to be put on from other teams is something they're going to have to try and get in that kind of 80 to 100% that Jip likes to touch on around ascendancy at set piece-wise.
And I think maybe it's just a change of psyche, because as Bryn said, they're very good at the jackal. But it's if you don't get the jackal, there's too many bodies on the ground defensively, or it doesn't slow it down enough and they're removed. So that fixation of always just thinking, okay, I want to take the space, I want to take the metre so the halfback can't get clean ball. And you can always hook it back, as long as your body height's right and you've stepped over the ball. But that's probably to be specific. It's changing that mindset from the jackal to taking space.
That second person coming in has to be dominant, whether that's been able to get landing on the top of the ball, to be able to, I guess, stack, or being able to stay square and going on top of someone to get that, I guess, that slow ball. And then from that, what Jip's saying, going to be able to counteract and barging through, not kicking it forward, but kicking it backwards, which is allowed to be able to try and slow down the ball, because, the Canadians were able to attack at a high percentage with that game line percentage that Jip is touching on.
Now, for the last few weeks and for the rest of the season, we're starting our partnership with the All Blacks trainer, Dr. Nick Gill, and his Rugby Ready team. Each week, we'll give away free 4-week training programs or 1 free training ebook collection. To win for yourself, a family member, or a friend, follow at Rugby Ready on Instagram, then direct message ARP, as well as this week's unique entry word, FEND, and why you're a good choice to be the winner. A huge congratulations to this week's winner, Paul Sadler. You've scored 4 free weeks of access to the Rugby Ready Perform membership for your son, Jack. Paul says Jack was an aspiring sprinter between 14 and 16 years old. Unfortunately, he suffered a concussion at 16, which meant he couldn't train or exercise for a couple of years. He's now 20. He's trying to find his way back. So thanks again to everyone who entered. We loved reading your stories, and if you didn't win this time around, don't worry, you're still in the running, so keep those amazing submissions coming, and it could be your name we announce next week. Next week's prize is the Ultimate Conditioning Bundle featuring Dr. Nick Gill's 4 essential training resources. It's an epic toolkit for anyone who's serious about performance. So look, we will continue to try to give away your chance to get your body right, to get your mind right for rugby or whatever physical activities you have working with the Rugby Ready team. Well, let's take ourselves to the tipping then off the back of that. Maddie 3237 is still ahead in the tipping comp, so 2 weeks to go. You could have a spot on the show very soon if you keep that up for the next couple of weeks. Let's get into the first game of the weekend. Crusaders versus the Highlanders. Crusaders at home, Jibber. Crusaders. Yeah, so the Highlanders, I mean, they'll push them, but...
Look, I think it'll be challenging because it's that Southern derby. Bryn, you'll know more about it than me, but too much at stake for the Crusaders. They need to be on.
Definitely. I think the Crusaders, and I think the Highlanders played actually really, really well. It was probably one of their best games of the year in terms of how they played the game. It's probably just the last 5 minutes that they weren't able to close it out, and they had multiple opportunities to do that. But I know we're going to keep this nice and short, Ross, so I'm mumbling a little bit, but I will go the Crusaders. But Highlanders, Southern derby, always tough.
The next one is the Reds at home against the Hurricanes, Brenner. Interestingly, that's no easy thing for the Hurricanes. And then after that, they've got MP. So while they're sitting fifth on the table, they can absolutely not rest on their laurels.
No, they can't. And I've actually picked them. We actually probably didn't go a little bit in depth around the table. I've got the Reds just slipping in to finish on 36 points. I think whether they get a win this week against the Hurricanes or the following week, they will definitely get a win. I think they just slip into the six. But look, I just think the Hurricanes, I think, they kind of fell into the trap they did previously when they made a lot of unforced errors, and they probably had multiple opportunities to score points or to make big line breaks, but that execution factor was a little bit hard for them that they probably had in the early part of the year. And I think the injuries-wise, I hope, Nani Punivai, Balin Sullivan, obviously the Holo's out as well, and obviously who got injured on the weekend? Yoss is injured. I know Flanders is coming back, but maybe the injuries and the depth might be tested, so the Reds might be seeing that as an opportunity. But I'll be picking the Hurricanes. I think they'll be able to do enough in Brisbane.
That's a good observation. The Reds could slip out of the six, couldn't they? I hadn't really looked at that until Bryn just said that. Yep. 32 points. So the Canes, MP and the Blues could overtake. That's a big game.
Yeah. I mean, they do have the draw at home, which would suggest that's a win.
Yeah. They are hard at home.
Yeah.
I'll go the Canes. They had an off week. Again, they created so much. They could have won by 40 had they just finished off their line breaks. So I'll just put that down to a bad execution week and they'll be back. I think Brett Cameron back as well is just perfectly timed.
He played well. He definitely played well. Okay, Chiefs, Moana, Pacifica.
Chiefs. Okay, Force versus the Waratahs, Bryn.
I'll go the Force because it's in Perth and they're a different team in Perth, so I'll go the Force.
Just so many injuries, man. They've had to bring over guys that went in the squad for that Fiji game. I need to see the squad to see if any of the injuries come back, but I'll go the Waratahs under the current perception of injuries.
Yeah, so I'm just going to take a step back. Chiefs, straightforward. We just talked Moana Pacifica right up.
But we sort of already said in our chat that we expect the Chiefs to win.
We expect them to win. But, you were both very certain.
I think it'll be 1-12.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it wasn't certain. It was just I felt like we'd thrashed that, so you didn't want us going down another rabbit hole, so I was just trying to keep it moving.
Fair enough. Okay, right, yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the show once again this week. Thank you very much to Ashley and Martin Medical Hair Centres for helping us put the show on. Thank you to everyone for helping us behind the scenes, the editors, the camera people, everyone who helps put this together, directors, etc. So thank you as well to you for watching. We'll catch you next week for another week of the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Mā te wā.